We are inside of our store called Culture Collection, and we're in Florence Square, Sacramento, California, South Sacramento, actually.
All right. And how
Mm.
long have you been in business?
I've been in business since 1992.
92.
1992 was when we first started our first store.
Okay. Can you tell the viewers predominantly what your store is about?
Well, it's actually kind of relates to the African American culture, which I'm very familiar with, and because we did not see any stores at the time that had the kind of merchandise that we would be carrying, which includes black greeting cards, black dolls, African clothes, African carvings, home decor, things like that that just didn't see in one place. You may have to, go all over the place looking for something. But we wanted to have a store that reflected African American culture. And we also had, books too, books that people could read about their culture,
Okay.
which are hard to find.
Okay. So I guess kind of segueing. So is how did you basically? I know you did mention that you didn't see, too many black, if not any black,
Hmm.
cultural collectible stores here.
Hmm.
But what kind of like made you want to get into this type of business?
Well, I think, I've always been interested in African merchandise, and we had an opportunity to go to Nigeria and Ghana. And we saw a lot of things that we loved there, and we brought some things back. And we had a lot of people say, can you get me one of these, or can you get me this, and can you get me that? So we kind of like started investigating how to import items from the continent, and we started that way. And we first started, we were selling things out of our home, and ran into somebody who said, if you had a store, would you be willing to have an African American store? So I said, well, if we could, I'd want it in a prominent place. I would want it in a major mall or some shopping center. So we were able to get into Florin Mall at the time, which was a pretty thriving mall in South Sacramento. In fact, it was the first indoor mall in Sacramento area. And we kind of started from there. And I think it was mostly, we started with African American Christmas cards. They were very hard to find. And this is in Sacramento, which, you probably could go to Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and find things more readily than you could in Sacramento. But the population was, of African Americans was getting, larger, and we just felt there was a need to have something that reflected the culture.
Okay. And so let's go back into terms of history, in terms
Hmm.
of your family. So in terms of family, like where are you from? Because I know a lot of us actually migrated from the south.
Hmm.
Do you have family that extends to the southern region of the United States?
Well, probably so. We have, I think, the original family members, like my great great grandfather, came from Arkansas, and they came up here. And I keep stories from my father that he started growing cotton in Sacramento County, and he was actually the first person to grow cotton in Sacramento County,
Wow.
near the McClellan Air Force Base. He had some property there, and he was also ran for state legislative person. He didn't win, but he's very politically involved, and he encouraged my father to get an education and give back to the community. Because he was telling us stories about that. And my dad, he was raised he was born in California, Fowler, California, which is near Fresno, and the family ended up moving up to Marysville, and that's where he graduated from high school, and he got a football scholarship to Fresno State, where he played football, and from there he learned how to fly airplanes. He was very interested in flying, and from there he ended up being a Tuskegee Airman. He was actually in the war as a Tuskegee Airman. He went through a lot of trauma to get there, and that's another whole story. My mother was actually a student at Fresno State. She was born in Missouri, and she had relatives. My aunts had relatives in California, so she ended up coming to Fresno State College, and that's where they met. And there were 3 black students on the campus, 2 males and 1 female. So the 2 males were kind of vying for the female, and my father won. And so he went into the military, and when he got out, they stayed in California and bought a home here in 1940 something. And he was still in the military, so we were overseas a lot. We were actually out of the country for about 16 years. We were in England, And I was 7 when we went there, and when we came back, I was 16. And we went to Texas. So people ask me where I'm from. It's hard for me to say. I was born in Missouri, but we lived overseas a long time, and we lived in California. So we really consider ourselves Californians. Most of my siblings were all born in California. The two youngest were born overseas in England. But that's how we ended up in Sacramento.
Okay, so um, why did your dad ever? Or was your grandfather or your dad who once again who had the crop?
It was my great grandfather, my father's
Your great,
grandfather.
okay.
My father's
So,
grandfather.
so was it ever explained to you why that cotton was something that was
I don't know. He was very much an entrepreneur. I'm really, I've got some cousins that I'm getting ready to do some get information about him because he sounds like a very interesting character, and he did a lot of things that we're just finding out about in the 1800s that were just amazing. And I don't know that much about him, but I do know that there's other relatives that do know more about him. So I'm going to get some research from a couple of cousins that I found that have done a lot of research on him. But he sounds like a very interesting person.
Yeah, well, the reason why it's about cotton because I think most people equate cotton to the United States
Mm-hmm.
and the enslavement of our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was just interesting how one of your ancestors
Mm-hmm.
actually wanted to
Mm-hmm.
pick up that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not really sure why he decided that. If he just wanted to see if it would grow here, and he was thinking of income, and at the time that was something that would have provided income for the family. I'm not sure, but that's something I would definitely find out about.
Okay. So, one, are you familiar with the California Reparations Task Force? And when did you actually find out about the California Reparations Task Force?
I probably last year I kind of got started reading more information about it because I know we've been reparations have been talked about for a long time because we a lot of groups have been paid back for things that have happened to them during the history of this country, and African American people have never ever been compensated for all the things that they've gone through in this country, and we really helped build a lot of things in this country, and are responsible for a lot of techniques and inventions and things that have made life easier for people. Most of people don't know that, so I think it's a really very important task force, and I really wish them as much as they need to get this reparations going.
So, what is your understanding of reparations, and what does reparations look like to you?
Well, it's a method of figuring out a way to compensate African Americans for what they sacrificed for, what their ancestors sacrificed to in this country, because majority of us did not come over here voluntarily. We were kind of forced and kidnapped and made to work for nothing and help other people get rich. And I think that it's time that we get some kind of payback for what we contributed to this country to make it as great as it is.
Okay. So what are some of those things that you could see that would repair? Like, do you think compensation, money, land, any other proposals that you could think about?
Well, that's a good question. I really think there's a lot of people that could benefit from some monetary gifts. There's people that could get made for a free education, like a higher education opportunities, as well as land, because a lot of land was taken from people, and some people really should have it back. And I'm sure if we started doing a lot of research, you'd be finding a lot of African people have lost land, and I really think that my grandfather lost land also, and we're looking into that too.
Good.
Yeah.
We've actually had many conversations and interviews with
Mhm.
individuals who've said, that they have to look into their own history
Mhm.
because even with Daniel Blue, who is one of the first founders of First African
Mhm.
Methodist Episcopalian Church, that
Mhm.
his descendant, he believes that actually his property got eminent domain
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
then the government at the time
Yeah.
here in Sacramento, because there was like a whole bunch of property around where the I think the AME, not the AME, but the Amtrak, the county office, and what else is over there? So they got the county, the railroad. So supposedly he had all that land, and so he's trying to figure out what happened to my ancestors' land. It was over there,
Yeah.
but it's not there anymore. So what happened to that?
Yeah.
So do you think that might be something as well in terms of some type of I don't know, restorative, reparative, like land acquisition?
Yeah, I think land acquisition of lands. There's still a lot of property still even in this state. There's a lot of property that's open. I mean, it's not it's just fields, and it could be something that I've been thinking about. Allensworth, that was a town that was built, and mysteriously things happened. Kind of like very funny little things happened, and the next thing you know, that's gone. It was gone for the people that live there. I mean, they're restoring it now and made it a national park, which is wonderful, state park, I should say. But there's probably lots of evidence of things like that in this country as well as the state.
So speaking of land, so we're here at Florence Center. Now, what do you think? I was talking to Mr. Davis in terms of like gentrification, gentrifying. Do you think somehow something or like reparations can also be like something that can happen for centers like this? Because from my understanding, basically Florence Center is the only like predominant area where black people or African American people have any business, like because I don't see it anywhere else in Sacramento.
Yes, it's referred to as Florence Square. It's the only place that I know of that has that many businesses. I mean, supposedly I think over 200 businesses in here of various kinds, and majority of them black owned. There's some other minority owners here also, but it has a potential of being a very, very prominent or dominant kind of a place for people to actually come and get a lot of the services that they need in one place, and have access to attorneys and accountants and retail stores and beauty supplies and all kinds of things that is potentially here. I mean, we have some of those things here now, but it's can do nothing but grow bigger and better.
Do you think there needs to be some like upgrades here into the mall, or do you think there should be?
Well, there should be more things to make it more noticeable and more readily. There's a lot of people in this community and immediate community that don't even know this is here. I've had some people tell me that they just happened upon it some kind of way, but we need to get the word out that we're here and that businesses are here for people to shop, and there's a lot of other ethnic groups that support their own businesses and they thrive and multiply and we need to do the same thing.
All right, so one more question for you. This is a particular I'm asking actually two more questions. One, who do you think should actually get reparations here in the United States when it comes to black people? Because currently the task force has decided that it should be for African Americans who descend from U.S. chattel slavery. Basically, you have to have an ancestor that you can prove that was in chattel slavery or that was here, I think, prior to 1900 as a free black, quote-unquote, Negro, African American, black person during that time. It has been suggested that people outside of that should also get some of the reparations. What's your thought on that? Do you think right now it should just go to those who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, or should it be extended out beyond those particular type of eligibility requirements?
I think probably to start with it should be those people who are whose ancestors were the enslaved people that were brought here. To start with, and then from there kind of see what else can be done, because it's gonna take a lot of research probably to find who is actually a descendant of an enslaved person that came here. So, I probably need to do a little bit more research on that, but that's my thought right now. Well, from what I know, it should be just focused on those people who can prove that they're a descendant of an enslaved person that was, that came here, brought here.
Okay. One more question. This might be a toughie question. So, answer to your best ability.
Okay.
All right. So it's been said that supposedly, um, the majority of black people, African people, um, actually weren't kidnapped and taken from the continent of Africa, right?
Hmm.
So, kind of, what are your thoughts on that? And when I mean, I know we from history, supposedly some of us actually got dropped off over in Brazil, down into
The Caribbean islands.
etc., and then eventually moved up to the United States. But what's kind of your thoughts, since you're more of the elder in the community, in terms of like, because there's this thing going around that there were just like millions of quote unquote black people here in the United States when white people came over here, and then like black people got enslaved actually here on this continent. I'm just going to be honest, this is the first time
That's the first time I've heard
came
that.
across this, but it seems to be trending right now that that's a possibility. Kind of, what's your thoughts on that? Did black people actually get enslaved, like specifically over here, and did like the transatlantic slave trade actually not exist?
Well, way I would answer that is when I was in Ghana, we went to what was called one of the slave. They don't want to say castles anymore because they're not really a castle, where they actually shipped the slaves, enslaved people. They kidnapped them, and we went to this big huge facility, this big huge place. And based on the size of it, there must have been a lot of people that were put in there. And we went into one of the places where they kept people, and you could see the chains thing on the floor where people were chained up, and you could see the place where they actually, exited that building into the ships that took them to wherever they went. So they went to the Caribbean or they went to this country. So in order for them to have those big places there, they had to have been taking a lot of people out of there. I've also heard of the continental, I think I forgot exactly the term. I don't know if it's a continental flow of the way the ocean runs, and people who left Africa in ships or little boats, that they actually, landed in places where, like a place like Belize, in those parts of the country, and that's why you see some African people there, and their descendants are still there. So I'm sure that some of them came, that way, and whether they were enslaved after they got there, I don't know. I haven't heard that before. I'll have to do some more research on that. But I know there were people that were, that were freed people, and they were enslaved because somebody, they could do that because they had the weapons and the means to do that. So some people who were free weren't free very long, and brought back into the slavery thing. So, but I think I'll do a little more research on that. I hadn't really heard that before.
All right. So just last question, just we'll wrap it up. So, in terms of like history and what, in terms of like the education of black people in particular, like what from your understanding, especially now, because this is very a cultural, identity, store. Like, how do you see, or what do you see in terms of reparations, that could somehow, in terms of identity or culture, some if I'm saying this correctly, how do you think that can be kind of part of the restorative or reparative justice for people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery in terms of like cultural restoration?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, I was thinking more of some financial resources for people to, get into their own businesses in order to, um, have something that they have to show that they made it, I guess, in the sense of this, this country is actually one of the countries where it says, they say anybody can make it here and you can, live your dream or whatever. And some people haven't had the opportunity to live their dream because they couldn't get finances for businesses or get things started or couldn't go to school or whatever. So I would think that if the reparations programs could even help people get easier, business loans or opportunities to go to college or to go to trade school, um, I think that helps overall, just your overall well-being. I don't know if I answered the question correctly because I'm not sure. It was a long question.
Yeah, I know. So I guess it's more in terms of just, cultural identity. It seems like since we've kind of lost that identity and it's been taken from us, right? I mean, in some way, like most of us, if not, I'll just say most of us. I'm not saying all of us can't trace us back to the motherland, but most of it cuts off at a certain point. So just in terms of since you've kind of embraced yourself around like cultural understanding, like how could we kind of reestablish in a way kind of cultural identity within like reparations, like do you see kind of like any proposals or anything education wise like black people can, I mean, not just from continent but even like black America in itself, because we have a rich history here, just in terms of, because I guess my question is like how do you see, because I mean this is quite a bit of history in here, right? When we talk about this is a huge cultural identity. I mean, you're talking about the black fraternities and sororities, right? So what do you see just in terms of cultural identity, right, being here in America, that could somehow help in terms of like the repair of black Americans here?
I think, definitely need to work with the schools and making sure that there's opportunities for kids to, I think our history programs in schools need to be changed to include the African American contributions to this country. And I think there are a lot more kind of private schools, or not really private schools, but voluntarily schools, because we have one here. We have a melanin school in this particular square that meets, and there's people there that are giving, talks and lectures and opportunities for our young people to learn about their history. And it's I think it's completely volunteer kind of a program, but those things could flourish, with some funds, and they could be in a lot of, churches or schools or after-school programs if they can't do it in the regular school day. And those are things I think that all of us need to, really learn. And there's a lot of parents that, I mean, we taught our kids a lot of things, but because we knew a lot of things, but there's a lot of parents that don't know a lot of things. So I think it's, it behoves us to learn more things about our history, and that could be done through different organizations, chambers, black chambers, and NAACP, and there's all kinds of, places that those things could be actually encouraged for people to encourage to learn about their history and culture.